My name is Eva, and for the longest time, I believed my life was flawlessly in order. I held a prestigious role as head of marketing, was married to my loving husband, Caleb, and enjoyed the comfort of a financially stable and secure life. Our mortgage payments were entirely handled by me, a fact I took pride in. It was a small but significant symbol of my independence and accomplishments. Family was everything to me. Caleb's younger brother, Felix, and their mother, Regina, were regular presences in our lives. Having lost their father years ago, Caleb's devotion to his mother and brother always touched me. It was a bond that made me admire him even more. His loyalty to family mirrored my own values. Regina, Caleb's mother, seemed to approve of me from the beginning. At family gatherings, she would engage me in conversations about my work, her tone curious yet warm. "Marketing, huh? Sounds important," she'd comment with an approving nod. It felt good to be welcomed by Caleb's family, and I genuinely looked forward to becoming part of their tight-knit circle. The early years of our marriage were filled with happy weekends, festive dinners, and lively family game nights. I remember one Thanksgiving at Regina's house vividly. The air was filled with laughter and the clatter of dishes, the perfect harmony of a family that seemed unbreakable. At that moment, I felt like I had everything I ever wanted: a loving husband, a stable career, and a family that embraced me wholeheartedly. The shift came slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. It began during a New Year's Eve party at Regina's house. I had just stepped into the kitchen to refill my wine glass when I overheard a conversation in the next room. Regina's voice carried over the music and laughter. She was mocking someone, Clara, a distant cousin. "Look at her dress," Regina scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "Trying so hard to fit in with the elites, but all she manages is cheap and tacky." I froze. Clara was a single mother who had always been kind to everyone, and hearing her being ridiculed like that stung. The warmth and admiration I'd once felt for Regina began to shift. What I had initially dismissed as harmless teasing began to reveal something darker. Over time, I noticed how Regina gathered Caleb and Felix into her web of whispered gossip. They'd sit together, chuckling over mean-spirited jokes about family members and friends. At first, I told myself it was just their way of bonding. But as the comments grew sharper, crueler, it became harder to ignore. I tried to voice my discomfort to Caleb. "Don't you think some of these jokes go too far?" I asked one night after dinner. He shrugged, brushing it off with a smile. "Mom's just old-fashioned, Eva. She doesn't mean anything by it." But I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my chest. The loving, accepting family I had once admired seemed to have an ugly undercurrent I hadn't noticed before. Easter Sunday should have been a day of joy, filled with warmth and togetherness. But for me, it became the day I reached my breaking point. As we sat around the dinner table, Regina began one of her casual criticisms, this time targeting a relative's financial struggles. Her tone was biting, cloaked in a veneer of concern, but her words were laced with judgment. I couldn't take it anymore. Rising to my feet, I spoke with a trembling voice, my heart pounding in my chest. "Why do you always feel the need to put others down? This isn't right." The room fell into a stunned silence. All eyes turned toward me, and I felt the weight of their stares. Regina, unfazed, leaned back in her chair, her expression icy. "You're overreacting, Eva," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through steel. I turned to Caleb, desperately seeking his support. I hoped, prayed, that he would stand by me. But he didn't. He averted his gaze, avoiding confrontation, and his silence spoke louder than any words could. That moment shattered something inside me. The family gatherings I had once cherished now felt like a theater of cruelty, with Regina at its center. After that day, attending family events became unbearable. I often sat alone in a corner, nursing a glass of wine while Caleb stayed close to his mother. Occasionally, he'd glance at me with a look of quiet apology, but it was never enough. He never stepped away to offer the support I so desperately needed. One night, after yet another tense dinner, I confronted him. My frustration spilled over, no longer containable. Why can't you ever stand up to her, Caleb? I demanded, my voice trembling with emotion. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. She's my mother, Eva. What do you want me to do? I want you to tell her she's being cruel. I want you to stand by me, I said, my voice breaking. But he didn't. He never did. I began finding excuses to avoid family gatherings, a sudden work emergency, a migraine, anything to escape the harsh whispers and icy stares. The distance between Caleb and me grew wider with each passing day. Just when I thought our marriage couldn't become more strained, life threw us an unexpected curveball. I was pregnant. When I saw the positive result on the test, my hands shook with a mix of emotions, fear, hope, and uncertainty. Caleb's, I called out, my voice trembling. He came rushing into the room, concern etched on his face. When I showed him the test, his expression softened into something I hadn't seen in a long time, a glimmer of hope. We're having a baby, he whispered, his voice a mixture of shock and relief. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that this new life could mend the fractures between us. But the pregnancy proved far from easy. I was plagued by constant nausea and dizziness, and a looming threat of miscarriage forced me onto bed rest. As my condition worsened, I had no choice but to leave my job, a career I had worked so hard to build. To make matters worse, my eyesight began to deteriorate due to a rare and potentially permanent complication. I was confined to the bed, unable to function as I once had, and the isolation was suffocating. During this vulnerable time, I needed Caleb more than ever. But instead of being my anchor, he drifted further away. He began returning home late, his excuses vague, his presence fleeting. And some nights, he didn't come home at all. The day of my scheduled C-section arrived sooner than expected due to the complications with my vision. Natural birth was too risky, and I was forced to prepare for the surgery earlier than planned. Lying on the cold operating table, my mind swirled with fear and anticipation. As the anesthesiologist prepared me, I whispered, "Can you ask Caleb to come in?" The nurse hesitated before responding. "He's chosen to wait outside." The words hit me like a blow. My heart sank, but I forced myself to focus on the moment. When my son's first cries filled the room, a wave of emotion overtook me. Tears streamed down my face as love for this tiny life consumed me. For a fleeting moment, all the pain, fear, and loneliness melted away.
But the joy didn't last.
When Caleb finally entered the recovery room, his face was a mask of discomfort and annoyance. "We need to talk," he said abruptly, his tone cold and detached. I stared at him, confused. "Now? Can it wait?" "This isn't right," he continued, ignoring my plea. He dismissed the necessity of the surgery and lamented the presence of men during childbirth, citing old norms he believed in. His words felt like a dagger to my already fragile heart. Before I could respond, he stormed out, claiming the hospital environment was too much for him. I was left alone, holding our son, tears blurring my vision. The reality of my situation was clearer than ever. This man, the father of my child, was not the partner I thought he'd be. The first weeks of motherhood were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and overwhelming exhaustion. Caleb's presence was fleeting at best, and when he was home, he was more of a critic than a helper. "Can you shut him up?" he growled one night as our baby's cries echoed through the house. "I'm trying," I replied, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "He's teething, Caleb. It hurts him." But Caleb had no patience for our son's discomfort. "All you do is focus on the kid," he snapped. "What about me? What about our sex life?" His words stunned me. I was still recovering from major surgery, barely managing to function on minimal sleep, and yet he demanded more from me. As the weeks turned into months, Caleb's dissatisfaction only grew. One evening, while I struggled to soothe our fussy 7-month-old, Caleb dropped another bombshell. "You need to go back to work." I blinked at him, stunned.
"What?"
"But the baby." "We'll hire a nanny," he interrupted. "We can't keep living like this, Eva. We need the money." Despite my protests, his mind was made up. With a heavy heart, I began job hunting. Finding work with my compromised vision was a challenge, but I eventually secured a position at a smaller company. The pay was significantly less than what I had earned before, but it was something. When I told Caleb, his reaction was predictably dismissive. "That's it," he scoffed. "We're paying a nanny for this?" Tears welled in my eyes. "I'm doing my best, Caleb. It's not easy with my eyesight." "Excuses," he muttered, walking away. This was my new reality, rushing to work each morning, guilt gnawing at me as I left my baby with a nanny, struggling through the day with my limited vision, and coming home to a resentful husband and a son who needed me more than ever. Family gatherings remained a source of stress, especially because of Regina. She played the role of the doting grandmother when others were watching, but her disinterest was obvious. "Come to Grandma," she'd coo in a sugary voice, arms outstretched toward my son. But he would cling to me, turning his face away from the woman he barely knew. Regina's expression would sour instantly. "What have you been telling him about me?" she hissed one day, accusingly. "You're turning my grandson against me." I sighed, weary. "He just doesn't know you well, Regina. If you visited more often." "Don't you dare blame this on me," she snapped before storming off to complain to Caleb. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, my world shifted once again. Holding a pregnancy test, my heart raced as I saw the positive result. A wave of fear washed over me. My first pregnancy had been fraught with complications, and my health had been severely impacted. Could I handle another one? With shaking hands, I called Caleb at work to share the news. His response was sharp and impatient. "What is it?" he asked, irritation evident in his tone. "Caleb, I'm pregnant," I whispered. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Caleb finally spoke, his tone was dismissive, almost indifferent. "Look, Eva, I'm busy. We'll talk later. Just don't quit your job, okay? We can't afford that." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Tears welled in my eyes as I sank into the couch, feeling more alone than ever. This pregnancy, thankfully, wasn't as difficult as my first. The morning sickness was manageable and my vision remained stable, allowing me to continue working. But as my belly grew, so did the emotional chasm between Caleb and me. He spent more and more time at his mother's house, often coming home late and offering excuses that felt flimsy at best. One evening, after an exhausting day of managing our toddler while pregnant, I asked Caleb for help as he walked in the door. "Hey, could you read him a story?" "I'm really tired," I said, hoping for even a small gesture of support. Caleb glanced at me, then at his watch. "I promised Mom I'd help her move some furniture." "Don't wait up," he replied, already heading out the door. I watched him leave, tears stinging my eyes. Once again, I was left to shoulder everything alone. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I was 7 months pregnant and exhausted. Guests began arriving in the afternoon, filling the house with the warmth of conversation and laughter. John and Mary were the first to arrive, immediately pitching in to help. For a brief moment, I felt a glimmer of normalcy, a reminder of how life used to be before everything started unraveling. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang again. Felix walked in, a grin on his face. "Everyone, this is Serafina," he announced, introducing his fiancée. The room erupted in congratulations. Regina arrived shortly afterward, her face lighting up the moment she saw Serafina. Dinner was a whirlwind of chatter, with Regina lavishing attention on Serafina. "So, Serafina, tell me more about your job," Regina asked, her tone dripping with admiration. "I'm a manager at a national bank," Serafina replied modestly. "How prestigious," Regina exclaimed. Then, raising her voice so everyone could hear, she added, "Serafina here makes $220,000 a month. Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, successful." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, especially when she shot a pointed look in my direction. "Unlike some people, who can only pop out babies and breed poverty," she added with a smirk. My cheeks burned with humiliation. Mary, sitting beside me, bristled and seemed ready to defend me, but I gently placed a hand on her arm. I didn't want to escalate the situation, though every fiber of my being screamed to stand up for myself. Regina didn't stop there. "Why don't we all head to that new restaurant downtown?" "My treat, of course," she said, her syrupy tone grating on my nerves. Before I could process what was happening, Regina, Caleb, Felix, and Serafina were heading out the door. Caleb didn't even glance back at me. The cheerful mood of the evening evaporated, and soon the other guests made their excuses to leave. Only John and Mary stayed behind, their quiet presence a balm to my wounded heart. After they left, I sank into the couch, tears streaming down my face. My hand rested on my growing belly as I wondered how my life had come to this. It was nearly dawn when I heard the front door creak open. Caleb stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. He didn't say a word, heading straight to our bedroom. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone, hoping for some distraction from the pain. As I scrolled through social media, my heart sank. A series of photos appeared, showing Regina, Caleb, Felix, and Serafina laughing and smiling at an upscale nightclub. The caption stung: "Best family night ever. #blessed #family first." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I realized how little I mattered to Caleb, or to anyone in his family. This was supposed to be my family too, but I felt like nothing more than an outsider, abandoned and forgotten. The weight of everything, Regina's cruelty, Caleb's indifference, the constant isolation, pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. As the sun rose, I sat in the silent house, lost in thoughts of how much I had sacrificed for a man who didn't see my worth. As my due date approached, excitement and anxiety tangled together in my chest. The doctors had scheduled another C-section due to the short interval since my last, and I tried to focus on the arrival of our baby. But Caleb's recent behavior gnawed at me. One frigid winter afternoon, I noticed him unpacking bags of summer clothes. Confused, I asked, "What's all this?" "Oh, just saw a good sale. Thought I'd update my wardrobe," he replied, avoiding my gaze. It didn't add up, but with the baby on the way, I chose not to press him. I had been saving diligently, ensuring we had enough for bills, the mortgage, and a babysitter for our 4-year-old. Thankfully, my workplace had approved 3 months of unpaid leave, and I thought we were prepared. Then, just 5 days before my scheduled C-section, everything unraveled. I was resting when Caleb and Regina burst into the house, urgency in their steps. Following them to our bedroom, I saw Caleb hurriedly packing the summer clothes. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice rising with panic. "We're all going to Felix's wedding in Hawaii," Caleb replied curtly. "My C-section is in 5 days. Who's going to take care of our son?" I protested. "You'll manage, you always do," he said coldly, zipping up his suitcase. Before I could utter another word, they were gone, leaving me standing there in stunned silence. Reality hit me like a tidal wave. Frantically, I checked our joint account. Empty. Every penny I had saved was gone. With trembling hands, I called Caleb. "What?" he snapped when he finally answered. "The money. All our savings, where is it?" I stammered. After a pause, his cold laughter filled the line. "We needed it for Felix's wedding gift." "Don't be so greedy, Eva." The line went dead. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. Looking down, I saw a puddle forming at my feet. My water had broken. Panic surged through me as I realized the imminent risk to my pre-C-section scar. Clutching my phone, I dialed emergency services. The hospital was a whirlwind of activity, doctors shouting, machines beeping, nurses rushing. I clung to consciousness, my mind racing with fear for my baby. Hours later, I woke to the steady beeping of monitors. Mary's tear-streaked face hovered above me, her hand gently squeezing mine. "Eva, you're okay." "The baby's okay," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. Slowly, the reality of what had happened sank in. I had nearly lost my life, and my baby. 5 days after my emergency C-section, I was healing surprisingly well. The doctors were impressed with my resilience and cleared me to go home. But Caleb hadn't called. Not once. Not to check if I was alive, not to ask about his new son. At that moment, I knew our marriage was over. I reached out to John and Mary, asking if I could stay with them temporarily. They welcomed me and my boys with open arms, providing a safe haven and the emotional support I desperately needed. A week after leaving the hospital, Caleb finally called. I ignored the first 5 calls, but answered on the 6th. "Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" he demanded, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. "I'm at my parents' house with our sons," I replied calmly. "I filed for divorce." His reaction was a mixture of disbelief and mockery. "Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you? Everything you've done?" I countered, anger rising. "Like abandoning me before I gave birth? Or stealing our savings?" "Oh, get over it," he scoffed. "I'll pay you back, no problem. In fact, I don't even want to see you again. Do you know why? Because I'm going to be rich." He rambled on about a business venture with Felix's wife, Serafina, who had promised to make him wealthy beyond belief. "You never believed in me, Eva," he spat. "You always held me back. Well, guess what? I'm free now. And you're just a loser who can't see potential when it's right in front of her." The divorce proceedings were surprisingly swift. Caleb didn't contest much, returning the stolen money and agreeing to pay alimony. Since I had been the one making mortgage payments, the judge awarded me the house. The day I moved back into what was now my house, Caleb was there packing his belongings. He sneered as I walked in with our baby and toddler. "Enjoy this dump while you can," he jeered. "I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed out on." As he left, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The house felt brighter, freer, a place of healing and new beginnings. A year and a half later, life had settled into a new rhythm. I had returned to work, balancing my career and motherhood. It wasn't always easy, but we were thriving. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a news alert that made my heart race. Local banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in ruins. The article revealed that Serafina had been running an elaborate scam. She convinced Caleb, Felix, and Regina to invest in a fictional company, urging them to take out massive loans. The fallout was catastrophic. They lost everything. When Regina called, begging for help, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry for what you're going through, but my priority is my children. Please don't contact us again." As I hung up, a wave of relief washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt truly free.